Mr. Williams?
Yes, my name is Niall Williams. I would like to thank the commission. First of all, it's been an amazingly informative meeting. So my name is Niall Williams. I'm originally from a small town in rural New York State with more cows than people. On July 19th of 2019, I chose to come up here to Alaska to work for the Alaskan Railroad for Holland America Princess. What's originally started as just a 2-month endeavor to work on the railroad, I found a home up here in Alaska. I believe that it's the last frontier, but also the first frontier of our great United States of America. So throughout the meeting today, the commission has discussed a letter from the Alaska Supreme Court on June 5th, 2020. So I would like to go through that letter and discuss various paragraphs. First, I would like to speak to paragraph number 2. It talks about, quote, a dignity disparity. I would like to say that viewing persons as unequal, it leads to a lack of love and a lack of compassion. To that extent, I would like to speak of the mass slaughter of unborn children that is being perpetrated in our society. This systemic, premeditated murder is going on Lake Otis Boulevard in Anchorage at the Planned Parenthood Clinic, among other places. Now, these murders are funded by public tax dollars. Mothers go in that have a child in the womb up to 13 weeks and 6 days from conception, can be killed, and their parts will be harvested using public tax dollars of the state of Alaska. After which, up to the moment of conception, up to the moment of birth, the mother will then be shipped down to Seattle, Washington, to allow for her baby to be ripped out of the womb. We need to protect all persons' dignity, and that includes the lives of the unborn. Next, I would like to speak to paragraph number 3. In that paragraph, it talks about redressing your grievances with government agencies and the public, quote, being heard. And one of the commissioners said that when people are not heard and not treated fairly, that needs to be addressed by the commission. You also spoke about First Amendment rights throughout this topic and proceedings. I would like to speak to the fact that there have been 5 arrests within the community of Anchorage of 3 different peaceful persons that were accessing public meetings. 5 arrests have occurred, all of which were wrongful, on 3 persons here in the community of Anchorage, Alaska. This has occurred in the past 72 hours. These persons were deprived of their constitutional rights. They were not allowed to redress the government for their grievances. They were not allowed to speak freely. They were not allowed to enter into a public assembly. Next, I would like to speak to paragraph number 4. It speaks of equal treatment. I would like to talk about the fact that equal and just access to courts is very important. The classes in our society, the elites, are now dictating laws from the executive branch and from the judicial branch. This occurs locally, this occurs on a state level here in Alaska, and this also occurs on the federal level, where the executive and judicial branches are making laws. As is dictated by our Constitution and separation of powers and equal branches of government, only the legislative body can make laws. Also, I would like to speak to disparities in access to legal representation. Those being charged criminally have no access to their legal representation, no access to face their accusers in a court of law. Based on the letter of the Supreme Court Justice Bolger, on the 25th of November, 2020, he shut down Rule 45D of the Criminal Code of the state of Alaska. This allows for a speedy trial in front of a jury of your peers within 120 days. So he has suspended criminal and civil trials in the state of Alaska. How are we supposed to have justice if the courts are shut down? How many people are sitting in jail at this time within the state of Alaska that have been wrongfully accused and are awaiting for vindication, to be let out of jail and to have their name be restored? How many victims in our community are suffering right now? How many families are suffering while they are awaiting justice for a crime perpetrated against themselves or against a loved one? Next, I would like to speak to paragraphs 5, which discusses incarceration, and paragraph 1, which discusses an impartial forum for cases. Impartiality and unbiased decision-making is quite important in the judiciary. No judge should participate in a legislative action. One judge was discussed as having been involved in advising a legislative body, and it seemed as though that the commission directed this judge to not participate, as it was a violation of separation of powers and equal branches of government. I would like to commend the commission on this advisement. It is very important that judges are unbiased. I would like to say that although we can restrict judges when they are operating on the bench, when they are free and consenting adults in their private lives, it was discussed how we were not allowing a justice to exercise his religious liberty based on the public perception of what would happen. Speaking of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, when the judge wanted to go to a candle vigil. Now, judges cannot make decisions based on what the fallout will be, what the political feeling will be in the community. They're required to make rulings based on the laws of this locality, laws of the state, and laws of the federal government. Next, I would like to speak to paragraph number 6 in the letter. It speaks of wounds of racism and of history. I would like to talk about the reparations through the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. This is giving land to Native corporations, not to the individuals. These corporations, these Native corporations, are often owned by Caucasians. They are not owned by actual Alaska Natives. If you look through the 50 or 60 something Alaska Native corporations in the state, the majority of the governing bodies of these Alaska Native corporations is actually white people. I would next like to speak to the Alaska PFD program. You said that it gives money for natural resource extraction and that that's a baseline income for all Alaskans. Well, first of all, that money is being stolen by the state government and by the local governments. That money is meant for the people to be equally divided among them, not for the government to pilfer off of that. Secondly, it creates a welfare state for the individuals in our state. Finally, I would like to speak to paragraph number 7. Wonderful quote by one of the greatest civil rights advocates of all time, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Says that injustice anywhere threatens justice everywhere. I would like to speak to the human trafficking, to the child trafficking, to the sex trafficking that's going on in our communities today. According to...
2 more minutes. Go ahead, 2 more minutes.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. I would like to speak to the fact that according to alaska.dps.gov, there is 1,254 missing Alaskans that are going on right now. They are missing. So out of our 710 or some thousand Alaskan residents, 1,254 are missing. Unsolved crimes are everywhere. And I know this is not, you're not a law enforcement body or a private detective, but this is injustice. How many families are waiting out there seeking justice? Finally, I would like to speak again to Mr. Sheldon and Judge Paul Roteman. I'd like to commend you both for your motion and for your second during this meeting to call into action the Alaska State Supreme Court for the June 5th, 2020 letter. It's time that they be made to answer, and hopefully it'll be in a public forum. I would recommend to the commission that this be held on Alaska Public Media or some similar source so that the public can actually listen to the question and answer portion. And I know that won't allow the judges to frame their responses, but it will truly give an opinion to the public as to where they really feel. I would finally like to give my email address, nial.williams@gmail.com. And my phone number is area code 907-717-9647. I will be more than happy to follow up with any members of the commission that would like to discuss my topics further. I would like to again thank the commission for allowing me to speak today, albeit through a restricted process where I was required to be pre-approved, not only for participation, but then subsequently for the content of my participation. But I appreciate the latitudes that you have given me today in my discussion, as I feel that I have kept them on the specific topics of today's meeting. Again, I would like to thank all members of the commission, and I would ask that you look into the November 25th, 2020 letter of Bulger, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, who then on November 30th, 2020, retired. So he gave a letter to close all the courts, a summary decision, therefore removing due process of all persons in Alaska, and then 5 days later retired. I find that to be at best worrisome, at worst nefarious, and malfeasance of duties. I